you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. I'll never know how much it costs to see my sin upon that cross. I'll never know how much it costs to see my sin upon that cross. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. Beauty that made this heart adore you, hope of a life spent with you.
Praise the Lord, ye heavens adore him. Praise him, angels in the heights.
Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God.
My God and I go in the fields together. We walk and talk as good friends should and do. We clasp our hands, our voices ring with laughter. My God and I walk through the meadows you.
We clasp our hands, our voices ring with laughter. My God and I walk through the meadows you.
He tells me all the years that went before me, when heavenly plans were made for me to be, when all was but a dream of dim conception, to come to life as bird and glory see.
When all was but a dream of dim conception, to come to life as birth and glory see.
My God and I will go foraying together. We'll walk and talk as good friends should and do. This earth will pass, and with it common trifles, but God and I will go unendingly.
This earth will pass, and with it common trifles, but God and I will go unendingly. Tempted and tried, we're oft made to wonder why it should be thus all the day long, while there are others living about us, never my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. When death has come and taken our loved ones, it leaves our home so lonely and drear. Then do we wonder why others prosper, living so.
All right. So, again, the approach is some of these topics and areas that Satan attacks us in. And I think it's good. It's always good, these topics. Certainly as we begin this new year, you know that Satan is going to come after us in these areas and these ways. And so I think it's a good study for us to start this year looking at these different topics. And so, you know, we've talked a little bit about, kind of introduced it 2 weeks ago and talked about problems in general and how Satan is the source of you know, pain and suffering. And then last week we talked about worry, right? And you say, Robert, boy, these are hitting on all of these that, well, they're all going to hit on. We're all going to get hit with these probably. And there's not going to be a topic probably that is not one that we don't struggle with or have struggled with. And tonight's is fear. So that is what we're going to look at. What is fear? You think about fear. What is fear? What do you think about? Maybe a definition or something that comes to mind when you think about fear. What comes to mind first? Yeah, Dolores? Okay, anticipation of something bad. Often is the case, yeah. What else think about? You think about when you think about fear, fearing something, or what comes to mind? The unknown. Okay, yeah, Brilena. Being afraid. Sometimes fear is good, keeps us safe. Absolutely. You know, we think about a child that has to learn that, you know, touching things or playing in the street or whatever it might be. So yeah, that's a good question. You know, not all fear is bad, right? And we'll touch on this just a little bit, although it's not our focus tonight to talk about the good fear of the Lord, right? What's the Bible talk about? That the whole duty of man is to what? What's Ecclesiastes say? Fear God and keep His commandments. And so this idea of fearing the Lord, having reverence, godly, being in awe of God, and living before Him in light of that. But that's not what we're focusing on tonight. We're focusing on the negative aspect of how many times do we find statements and commandments about fear not, right? Matter of fact, there's a calendar you can get that's got 365 days, and every day it's got a fear not scripture. It's a, you know, I mean, there's so many. Jesus talked about that how many times with His disciples. Fear not, right? And so what are things in it? What are those negative things that we fear? Someone talked about the unknown. What are some other things we fear that would be kind of on that negative side? What are things we're afraid of? Taxes. What did you say? Loss. Yeah. What else? Things we're afraid of. Yeah, Dolores? Pain or suffering. Fear. Yeah. Yeah, we feel overwhelmed. We feel just without any strength or ability to do something. Yeah, Roy? Fear of public speaking. Yeah. Yeah, Marcia? Stranger danger. Yeah. See, now you're going. Now I got you rolling. Yeah, Dolores? Fear of water. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. How about fear of death? What? Afraid of the dark? Yeah. How about fear of death? That's a big one that haunts a lot of people, and we all, in some variation, would say we've had those moments, our mortality. And that there's so many, you know, sickness and health and job and relationships. You ever Afraid for your kids, afraid for your grandkids, right? It's a world that just can be consumed with fear. And it doesn't help that you can turn on the television or go to your phone and the news feeds what? Fear, right? Constant. And so I think that's a great challenge for us. So how would Satan use that? Because that's kind of the two. If you're going to say, hey, Robert, that kind of sounds like what you did last week. Yeah, there you go. We're going to kind of do this every week, basically. How's Satan use it? Yeah, Jeff?
Hey, sorry, I don't know whether it's how Satan uses it, but a long time ago, one of my uncles told me, I was talking about a scary movie or something.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I don't ever watch scary movies. He said, because it makes you weaker. Because that, and I tell my kids that, because when you're in the dark,
Right.
those images come in your mind,
Yeah.
not so much when you're older.
It's our story. This is a preacher's story, of course. So his mom told his little boy, her son, to go get the broom out on the back porch. It was dark. It was at night, and he didn't want to go. And she said, "Oh, there's nothing to be afraid of out there. There's nothing, I don't know." And she said, Jesus he's with you. He's watching over you. And he'll protect you. And the little boy goes out there and he cracks open the door and Jesus, would you hand me the broom? It's just kind of, we're kind of, all right, he's with me, but, we're just afraid of the dark. There's a lot of things that, and so, think about, we have this fear, this emotion. Now, a lot of it can be rational, logical, right? When Jesus was in the boat, it's one of the craziest, how I say this, Jesus Jesus kind of said some crazy things. I almost stopped myself, but no, I do believe that. He said a lot of crazy things that people, and I think that'd be one of them. Why are you afraid? On the storm, was that illogical for them to be afraid? No. So there's illogical, rational, and there's rational fear. That's logical. Is it logical to be afraid of fire? Yes. Is it logical to be afraid of a storm on a sea and you're out there in the middle of it? Yes. And so we all have fears. We all have these emotions. It's not, of course, we'll get to, Jesus, what he was getting at there. The trust in God, have faith in me. And so I think that's real important. I would turn over to Joshua 1. I want to look at Joshua, an example out of Joshua for a little bit here, and then we're going to look at another example too. So I told you I'm teaching Ruth on Sunday mornings, and I mentioned how preachers are notorious about this is one of my favorite books. Ruth really is one of my favorite books, but I'll tell you, Joshua's up there too. I'll get around to Joshua one day. You can just count on that. I'll be covering Joshua at some point. Love the book. You get down here, look down here at Joshua 1, and verse 5. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I'll be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give to them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. And here's verse 9. Here's what we see on the walls and placards. And be strong and courageous. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will go with you wherever you go. He doesn't say, why are you afraid? I find that interesting. Joshua, he's acknowledging that Joshua is going to have some uncertainty, some apprehension, some fear. what's going on here in Joshua 1? What do we quickly know? What's the context? What's happened? It's even mentioned in the text. Getting ready to go in the promised land without their ace. Who's their? Moses. Oh, Moses was everything to the people. And so now you're without your, you've been in those situations where you're like, we ain't going, I ain't doing it without him, without her. We're just, right? We'll stay in today. We're not working. We're not, Moses was there, and now he's, in the text, Moses is dead. Moses is dead. It's repeated several times, right? Moses is gone. And sometimes you can kind of skirt around things like that, but sometimes it's best to acknowledge it. Moses is dead, and he's not what? He's not coming back. That's called facing what? The reality. That's kind of going to face your what? Their fear. They're apprehensive. And, of course, that's what Joshua is going to be, he's going to learn. You've heard the fear response, fight or flight, right? There's actually a kind of a third one. It's kind of before it's to freeze, right? If you ever, last time Cameron and I went camping down South Oklahoma at the wildlife resort place this is outdoor camping, backpack camping. And it's late at night, and I'm out there, and, I remember I was walking, we were getting fire. All we did was get firewood the entire time. Seems like we need more firewood. Ken was in charge of the fire, and he just kept saying, we need more fire. Finally, I said, I'll watch the fire. You go get the firewood. But I'm out there, and I heard, you hear what? Animals? And you stop what immediately? I was freezing a couple of times because I don't want to what? I walk up into something. I don't know, skunk or look, Jeff's like, Robert, you big wimp. But big old bear come out and get me, right, Jeff? Right? Mountain lion, something. Now, don't say a little squirrel, something in there was running through there. Yeah, no rabbit. It was bigger than that, Roy. It was making, branches were breaking.
Your imagination's bigger than that.
Yeah, branches were breaking. It's a cow. Whatever it was dark and I couldn't see it. And I made sure I waited until I had my light. I was like, and so you freeze when you face something like that. And you've been there before. And so, you have that. And so here, fear is it's whether it's logical or illogical. How many times have you talked to someone now, don't think like that. Don't be afraid of that. Right? It's just how it is. Whether it's logical, illogical, rational, irrational. Fear is that psychological emotion that grips us. And the ability to push through that, to act in spite of that fear, is what we basically call courage. Right? Because what are you going to do? To overcome, you've got to have some what? You've got to have some courage. And that is what we want. That's what Joshua. And now the thing about this passage, God's been preparing Joshua his entire life. Exodus 24:13, Joshua was Moses' aide. So when I said that it was right there, Moses all the way, it was Joshua right there with him. He went up on Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb. Sinai and Horeb is used interchangeably. You say, wait a minute, which one is it? They're both. They have different meanings of the idea, but literally the idea here is this burning, to glow. Horeb's the idea of to glow. Remember what the bush was? The mountain would glow, the glory of God. The bush was burning up but not being consumed. And so it's a reminder every time. How often do you read about Mount Sinai, by the way, in those passages? How many times does the name Mount Sinai appear? A lot. Just count them up. Mount Sinai, Mount Sinai. They went to Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb. Every time they hear that name, they're hearing what? God's presence was what in the what? Burning bush. God's presence was on the mountain what? Remember the mountain that shook and was glowing, and that it's a reminder that God is what? God's right there. And so Joshua has been prepared each step of the way. He's going to lead them in all their battles. Exodus 17:9 says, they didn't go into battle without Joshua leading. He was the man. And it's incredible. There's just hardly anything you can find negative about Joshua in the Bible. He is just that. He led the people in all their battles. God would later change his name, Yoshua, which means salvation, to Joshua, the Yahweh saves. Every time his name is mentioned, it's mentioned now that God is the Savior. God is the one who saves. He's one of the two of the faithful spies. Do you remember that story? Now, there's some exaggeration that took place on the spies, 10 of the spies, okay? But it's not like they just were bold-faced lying, were they? I mean, the 10 spies didn't come up and just make up a bunch of stuff, did they? Now, they exaggerated. You know, what do we do sometimes when like I said, what was in the woods there that I was hearing at night was probably a big old bear, mountain lion. It wasn't a deer. No. It was a big old... So what do we do when we exaggerate, right? But were they lying overall about what were the people in the land like? They were big. What were their cities like? They were fortresses. What are they? A bunch of farmers. That's what they are. A bunch of slave farmers coming out of Egypt. And so you're going to round up a bunch of farmers and you're going to go take on what? Fortified armies? Yeah. So they weren't lying, but their fear led them to what? Oh, we were like what? Grasshopper. They could just, what do you do with grasshopper if you just step on them, right? And that's what they were saying we were. And what did fear do to in the camp? It spread. Well, isn't that fear spread quickly? Spreads quickly. It is something that it's amazing how it does that, and so we have to remember that this is a human emotion. It's natural. It can be logical, illogical. It's our ability to respond to that we have courage, and what produces that courage is, of course, our faith and trust in God, and that's what Joshua is being reminded of. Look at Psalms 27:1. Just kind of quickly, some stuff we've kind of touched on a little bit, but you can fear man, you can fear situations. Yeah, David and Goliath.
How many people's prey out there?
Yep. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Fear man, fear situation. We just talked about that with the Joshua. They were Joshua and Caleb were the two spies that said, "Hey, God can do this. He'll give us the land. Let's trust in Him." And so you see that in that regard. We also again touched on the fear of God. I do want to point out, I love Proverbs 14:27. I just taught on the book of Proverbs. I can't believe we didn't touch on this verse. I don't know where I could have worked it in, but now I'm working it in here. Sometimes we do that as preachers. We kind of put stuff in the back, bring it in the back door. back way. Let me, Proverbs 14 and 27. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life. Love that. Turning a person from the snares of death. I love that. Fear is gripping. Fear is a killer. Fear is destructive. It can be our downfall. It can be our demise. Again, we're not saying it's a sin itself to have fear. It's like you're not going to, but it's what we do with it, the ability to have courage and faith and trust in God that determines whether that fear is going to be lead us to sin and not trust God and to be disobedient. Because again, remember what we said last week? I gave you the same with worry. It's informed by our brain that produces action that leads to results or consequences. You're not going to not have fear. Okay? When God says do not fear, He's not saying don't ever have an emotion of fear. You can't. That's impossible. But what can you do is have the courage and the faith and trust in God to say, in spite of my fear, I will what? I'll trust, I'll act, I'll be faithful. I will do what I'm afraid of. And so that's this idea of fear in that regard. Yes, go ahead, Jeff. Or, yeah, it's a great one.
They didn't even seem afraid. They just said, we won't do it.
Right.
And even if you did it, we're not afraid.
Yeah, I mean, they might have been in their emotions. Maybe they were kind of inside, kind of. Yeah, they had. The text doesn't tell us. We know Abraham, when he was called to obey God and do the unthinkable, he had the emotions, right? He was, but the fear, we're informed in our thinking, our theology, our minds, which will lead us to act or not act or act in a certain way. And we can either obey God, trust God, and do what God says, or we cannot. And of course, in the case of the 10 spies, they came back and said what? God said, take the land, He'll give us the land, but we can't do it. And how did God react to that, by the way? What did He call that? He called it words like wickedness, evil, unbelieving. I mean, those are pretty strong words when you look at the Bible, what it describes that situation. They were unbelieving, wicked, an evil generation that went against God. The problem is they feared not God. And that's a whole nother, we could have a whole subject on fear of God. They did not have a proper fear of God. And that is, that's what they were lacking there in that regard. So you've got this, this fear that we have to have, that we will have. One of the examples I wanted to give you, and I didn't put any scriptures up here. Watch my time. I love the story of Elijah. Do you remember the story of the prophet Elijah when he has one of his mountaintop experiences, literally, at Carmel? Remember where they defeat the 450 false prophets of Baal and 450 of the Asherah? And remember God called fire, Elijah prayed and God brought fire down from heaven and it consumed, remember, everything. The rocks, the altar, the water, everything. And then Elijah said, off with their heads. Pretty much what he said, right? They went and got him, killed him. And he is feeling good, right? All it takes is Jezebel. We'll do a study on Elijah too. I love the character study on Elijah. All it took was Jezebel to say, by the next day, you're dead meat, Elijah. And his heart just melted with fear. And remember what he did? He fled. Now, interesting. Do you know where he went? Mount Sinai. Wait a minute. What did we just say Mount Sinai was? Burning? presence of God. He ran to the presence of God. Remember, he's there, and of course the angel's there. And what does Elijah want to do? Remember what is he's so down and depressed? He wants to what with his life? He wants to die. And what's he tell God? Remember what's to tell angel? He tells the angel that I'm the only. Now, he didn't know that he was a lot more successful because remember what the Lord tells him? There are what? Yeah. There are all these prophets who have not bowed before Jezebel, before Baal. And so and then they do that whole experiment or that whole experience where, remember the mountain, puts him there in that cleft opening and the mountain has fire. Remember how God used fire? Remember how God shook the mountain, right? But what does it say each time in the wind? But God was not in the what? Wasn't in there. Now, other times God was what? But God was in the what? The whisper. The what? Still, small voice. What's that mean? It means we want God to do the miraculous, the big, the what? The miracle, the obvious, part the Red Sea. But what's God's most often mode of operation is not that, is it? He works. What are we studying in the book of Ruth? What are we going to see? We're going to study Esther after that. What Esther? God's not even mentioned in Esther, barely mentioned in Ruth, and yet what? He's working behind the scenes, and we have to remember that. And Elijah had to be reminded of that as well. This is how God works. By the way, Elijah, he was afraid of Jezebel doing what to him? Remember? Kill him. Now, wait a minute. What's the irony of that? Elijah is only one of two people in the Bible that never died. You say, Robert, what are you saying? I'm just saying that's awesome. The thing he was afraid of, what? Never happened. Now, how about that with us sometimes? I mean, right? Now, unless the Lord comes back, we're going to physically die. That's going to happen. But what does Jesus say about fearing death? He says what? You don't really have to fear because I'm going to do what with you? With your body? I'm just going to resurrect it. And in fact, Paul uses language like it's just sleeping, right? We were talking about Tony doing the sleep study. We'll see how much sleep he gets. But when a person is sleeping, yeah, they're alive, but they don't necessarily look alive. I mean, but that's what Jesus, we're just sleeping, and the body is. And so I find that interesting that the thing that Elijah feared never happened. God's going to take care of us. God's going to take care of Elijah, and he does the same with us.
Isn't that true of a lot of things we fear?
Yes, I think so, Dolores. Yeah. We make up in our mind all these, again, I'm telling you, that was a grizzly bear. It was in that woods down there. And it wasn't no skunk or deer or squirrel. That was he was about to jump out and rip me to pieces. Right? I mean, that's what we think. In our mind, these scenarios of what? All this is going to happen. And I've said before, you're living proof because you're here that what? God is what? He's taking care of you because you're here. Yeah, Jeff?
Well, that makes me think of, when Joshua was going to the Battle of Jericho.
All right.
Remember, he ran into the angel.
Yeah.
Said, I'm the commander of the Lord's army. You just think that God was controlling all this army.
Yeah.
Joshua was like,
Yeah. Elisha's going to see the same thing when he's going to notice what? A host of angels. God gives him a glimpse. Same with us. Remember the study of angels? I mean, how many angels are there? Remember what the Bible talks about? You can't what? Countless. How many angels do we have at our, doesn't that give you a warm feeling when you think about that? And you say, well, Robert, I've known people who've died. Well, we understand that God doesn't promise us now that we're going to live in this body physically forever. Death is going to happen but God will be faithful to us, and He'll be with us. And I think that, so a couple of things. All fear must be met with resolve. You have to face it. You know this, psychologists, counselors talk about that. You don't deal with your fear by avoiding it. We're talking about facing it, okay? And you know, I listened to one of the podcasts I've listened to. He's a psychiatrist, and he's an amazing thinker, and he talks a lot about parenting. So he's talked a lot about, you know, the helicopter parenting, and he gives all the background about how that's developed. Basically, we're having less and less children. So 100 years ago, you had 10 kids. Number one, you couldn't helicopter 10 kids, right? You couldn't physically do that. Number two, you had to have the siblings would kind of keep each other in check and whop each other upside the head. And so you had rivalry, and you had all that. And so now people have just what? 1.5 kids. I don't know how they have that, but we just have one kid, 2 kids. So what? You're more protective. You put everything, all your money, all your time goes in that one child. And so there's now this, I have to protect my child, right? And this gentleman says, there is no, he says, you're either going to hurt your child or you're going to hurt your child. And he says that hurting the child for the worse is protecting them over, right? What you have to do is you have to prepare your child to live in the world, which means what? The world is what? It's wicked, it's scary, it's dangerous, there's going to be mean people in the world, right? And you got to prepare a child to live in that world and not what? Be afraid, hover. Now, he says you do that in measures. You don't just turn a 5-year-old loose in the, but you've got to little by little. And he says, but if you do that, if you parent that way, there's always the possibility that your child can be what? Can be hurt. You put them out there in the world to some measure, the world can do what to them? It might just be sending them to school, and other kids are what? Well, I'm not saying there's not a time and place to pull a kid out of school. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you can't pull them out of everything, can you? You've got to eventually teach your child to what? You got to learn how to respond to that. And I'm not talking about someone getting beat up and that kind of, but I am saying that there's going to be that. And so we have the same thing. We have to face our fears, but we do not do that alone. We do that with the knowledge of what? God. Emmanuel, which is what? God with us. Is there anywhere those Christians went? Lo, I'm with you what? Not just for them, but for us, right? My prayer is not just for you, but for those that believe. Remember he says in John 7? And so we're part of that. We have the Spirit of God. We have the presence of God. God is with us. And we've got to trust that the same God who took care of us in the past, He'll take care of us. And I love, you mentioned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I love what they say. God can save us from this fire, but what? Even if He doesn't, we're not going to fear you. Paul in 2 Timothy 4 is about to they're about to chop his head off. And that's what happens in 65, 66 AD. In the spring, we know, the springtime is when Paul was executed. That's exactly what they did. They marched him out of the city, and they beheaded him. So when he writes in 2 Timothy 4, God will deliver me, he knows, he says earlier, my time of departure is what? He knows he's about to be killed. But God, what? What we talk about? Jesus said, don't fear death because what? I've overcome. You're going to be resurrected. And so it's the same thing. We have that. God took care of us in the past. He will take care of us in the future. Let me ask you a question here, and share if you have anything that you could share. Maybe if it's personal, maybe not super personal if you don't want to share it. But is there a time in your life when you were afraid and God brought you through it? Is there anything just jump out at you that you think, boy, and it don't have to be major. It could be something kind of small, if you will. But is there a time when you were afraid and God brought you through? Yeah, Matt?
March 17th, 2020.
What happened there, buddy?
Cancer treatment.
Yeah. I mean, the diagnosis that just comes back can just paralyze people, right? It was cancer. We found cancer.
January 13th is when I.
Yeah, you got the dates, huh?
Actually, 10:18 a.m.
10:18. Was there some initial fear that bubbled up?
I was on floor 29. I was like,
But how's that working for you right now?
it'll be 4 years in April.
Yeah. And even beyond the physical, I mean, what has God done in your heart, in your faith? I mean,
Well, whenever I first, what were we down there? The first weekend, we were down there for about 4 days. We spent a weekend. I had my first ever panic attack.
right.
We got through that, and once, and I'm claustrophobic, and they got to put this mask over you in order to put you in the machine.
Yeah.
So I almost tore their machine up whenever I was first getting my mask, but over time, I'd get on the table to get microwaved, and I'd start praying, and eventually, probably the first couple of weeks, or after the first couple of weeks,
Yeah.
finally,
Yeah.
panic attack settled down, and it realized that you're actually going to survive it.
Yeah. And you have, and it's changed your faith in a stronger way, I know. And what else? Others, God's helped you through something. Anybody have it? Yeah, over here, Josh.
So my wife is the strongest person.
Did you shave, by the way?
Yeah, I did.
Sorry. Everybody looked. I knew I shouldn't have said that. Sorry. All right. I was first like, wait a minute, who are you over here that's talking? We have a visitor tonight. All right, go ahead, Josh. Sorry.
For spotting everything.
I messed with your comment. Go ahead.
My wife is the strongest person I know, and like when we went in to have our son, well, she was going to have our son. I didn't do anything.
You just held her hand and been right.
I barely did that. Not to get it broken. Seeing her go through that pain, I was shocked, and it was like it made me terrified.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't sure we were going to get through that moment.
All right.
I was terrified. So
Yeah.
I remember like having a moment of prayer. Literally, I had to walk out of the room and like gather myself. She's the one like giving birth, but I'm panicking.
Yeah. You bet.
I think that was an amazing moment.
Yeah. Others, what do you think about time afraid? God saw you through. Anything come to mind? Anybody share? Yeah, go ahead, Mom Sue.
Years ago, long before your time, the scare of the atomic bomb, that everybody went to build
Uh-huh.
bunkers or tried to buy stock up food.
Yeah.
And now they're doing the same thing with this light out, this grid deal,
Mm-hmm.
trying to scare people.
Right.
Stock up. But it was scary back then when I had 2 kids,
Yeah.
little kids.
Yeah. I can only imagine.
I mean, they had fear in everybody.
Yeah. Anybody else time that you were afraid and God saw you through? What? Anytime that? I'm sorry, Marcia. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I had a couple, but nothing real big. But what I'd like to know is, to me, the greatest fear of all would be like to have a child kidnapped.
Sure.
And wondering what's happening and if they're being tortured
Right.
or killed. How would you get through that?
Yeah.
Just knowing, I guess, if they're killed, they'll go to heaven. But
Sure.
still, that's just.
Yeah. No, that'd be bad. Anyway, Jeff.
Well, our oldest son, when he was about 3 or 4, when he was young, we lived out there, out painting doors or something out in the yard. He kept coming out. We live out, let's go up into our house. We live out, in the woods all around it. He kept coming outside. He was like, hey, let's go do something. I was like, yeah. Finally, I tricked him. I said, let's play hide and go seek. You go hide. You go outside. So I give him some cough
Right.
And Tony and Betty had come over, the whole yard full of people, and Betty came out. I found it. He had crawled under his bunk bed and pulled some sleeping bags or blankets all under him under there, and I gave him that cough vaccine.
So it comes back to Jeff, huh?
Passed out. The fire or ambulance people, they were looking at everybody. Christy walked in. But that, I was praying constantly.
Yeah.
God, crazy.
Some of you, let me say this. You're talking about child. Maybe some of you lost a child, right? Maybe some of you lost a grandchild. Some of you have lost a spouse, right? Some of you have lost, and God has seen you through it, hasn't he? Now, in those moments, it was what? How am I going to get, the fear, the emotion, the anger, we'll talk about anger, by the way. That's going to be one that we're going to, but God has got you through, right? He's been faithful in the past. He'll be faithful in the future. And we could go around and share 10 stories, probably all of us could, of different, small, big, all kinds of things here. And so it reminds us, don't let Satan use that. Really, the only thing Satan can use is deception. Really, his only real power, God, is to deceive. What's it say? He's the father of what? All he can do is lie. So he wants to lie to us with fear and all this in our minds that God's abandoned you, you can't overcome this, that's how he's doing, is he can lie and deceive us to get our fears to be turned against us. And we've got to trust in God. And that's how we can hopefully ward off his arrows with this. So, all right, we'll pick up there next time. Appreciate you guys.
Rejoice, oh come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give him the glory. Great things he hath done, great things he hath taught us, great things he hath done, and great our rejoicing through Jesus the Son. But purer and higher and greater will be our wonder, our transport when Jesus we see. Praise the Lord, let the earth hear his voice.
Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give him the glory. Great things he hath done, and give him the glory. Great things he hath done. Let every heart rejoice and sing. Let choral anthems rise. Ye aged men and children bring to God your sacrifice. For he is good, the Lord is good, and kind are all his ways. With songs and honors sounding loud, the Lord Jehovah praise. While the rocks and the rills, while the vales and the hills are